So both things are true, right? We still have to fight the original executive order, but the mass panic that was caused by the OMB memo, that has been rescinded. But because of the public outcry, because people, Democrats and Republicans, everyone came together and said, wait, we need these programs. We need these programs in our community, and we want to make sure that it's still available.
But your understanding is that the original EO does not affect services with the representative standing behind it.
The original executive order can still affect services, 100%. And so what we're going to see is, instead of a blanket freeze, they're going to look at programs individually to try to see what they want to cut. So we're going to remain vigilant. We're going to remain doing the work we need to do. But we did win in making sure we kept this blanket freeze away and cuts to things like Medicaid for now. But we still have a lot of work to do. And that's why, press conferences like this are so important, so people at home can realize how it has an impact here in Central Florida.
Congressman, there are a number of Central Florida agencies right now that are undergoing some expansions, renovations. They're depending on various amount of dollars, whether it's in kind, whether it's whatever, whether it's federal. Can you please address the concerns that maybe they have right now as they're waiting to do their expansions, considering the growing population of homeless in our community?
Yeah, I'll give a quick answer and then give it to the people doing the work on the ground. But here's the problem, and I heard this, HSN was one of the first organizations I spoke with yesterday. But taking a step back, I spoke with many agencies and organizations, healthcare providers that help low-income folks on Medicaid. Some of these providers were telling me if they didn't have clarity, if the portal wasn't open, they would have to take out massive lines of credit at very high interest rates to meet payroll to be able to continue giving care to people. And I know that HSN and organizations like that were having similar conversations. So I'll hand the mic over to y'all if you want.
So absolutely, every organization that's doing these services in our community, we each have our own budgets, and we each have our own amount of reserves, what we do and we do not have. And so when we're taking a look at these services being stopped, I can tell you inside my organization, the first thing I was doing today when it looked like rents weren't going to be paid was I was figuring out how many of our particular clients needed their rent paid, and how much of my reserves could I use to pay those landlords so that we were not going to make sure that those folks, even though I'm sure HSN was also trying to come up with their own solution, we were all trying to figure that out. For our organization alone, that was roughly about $100,000 just for February. So we're not talking about little bits, and actually that's only 13 households. I have a smaller caseload that was in this space. There are other organizations that had 25 cases, they had 25, they had 50, they had 200.
And secondly, you're not out of the woods yet. Are you still with cautious optimism with this rescission, or what? How do you stand?
Yeah, I think for us, just like the Congressman said, the executive order still stands, and so we know that reviews are still planning to happen, and so we have a lot of curiosity about what that looks like, but also, yes, there's incredible uncertainty about what that could be and how that could happen, and so I definitely don't want to repeat what the last 48 hours of just literal despair has been for us. And also, as I said in my talk, we will stay vigilant. We will pay attention. Thanks.
What has been the conversation between you and your team to realize that there may not have been a today press conference, that we may not be able to send these checks out?
Yeah, I mean, just like we just said, we were trying to figure out how much of our own reserves we could pull down so that we could pay those rents first and foremost. Then secondarily, how much of our salaries we could continue to pay on our reserves. We had reached out to some of our funders already to ask if they would be able to fill in the gap if that was necessary. So yeah, there was just tons and tons of moving pieces trying to figure out what our next steps were. Our priority, and I know the priority of HSN and our other partners that are standing up here, were the people that we serve, making sure that they had no disruption in their housing while this happened.
I just want to add to that, you may not be aware that in these types of contracts that we have with our federal partners, they are almost always reimbursement based, meaning we've already spent the money and now we're asking them to reimburse us. And so that makes this kind of an unexpected potential halt all the more challenging because it's obviously harder to plan when you don't know that you're not going to get reimbursed. And so that would have made things much more challenging for not only us, but many of our partners.
So what do you do now? in the wake of everything that's happened so quickly to prepare for what the unknown is.
Well, we're glad to see all of you, and we will continue to, work together on how we make sure that everyone who has any kind of say in how this moves forward understands the implications, understands what our programs do and don't do, and who we serve and don't serve, and how that happens, so that there's no confusion about why it would be important and in the best interest of our country for these services to continue, in the best interest of our community. But no doubt this has shaken many of our partners, and so there are going to probably across the community be more conversations about what do we do if, again, how do we maintain, what do we cut back, and so that creates some anxiety within the workforce as well as within our, the people who are benefiting from our services. And everybody knows what happens when your workforce gets anxious. It can make things a little more dramatic.
That was going to be my question. I know Central Florida has been trying to expand on helping the homeless community a lot, and right now it's already tight. So because the future is unknown, does that make you all in the back of your mind hold back on some programs that would have been in the future because you don't know what's happening yet?
I don't think anybody's planning on holding back on what we're doing now. The way this works, we get contracts. We've got X amount of time to spend those dollars. If we don't spend them, we don't get them. So there's not really a benefit in not trying to provide the maximum number of services that we can provide with the resources we have. But you're completely accurate that we do not have near the amount of resources that we need for the demand. So homelessness and the number of people that we see homeless and on the streets of Central Florida is 100% connected to a very challenging housing market. We are a very popular community. We are a fabulous community, and people want to live here, and people have been moving here for years, and it has been very hard for us to keep up the development of housing and transportation, to keep the infrastructure developed at the same rate that we have people moving here from the Northeast and the West and all over the country. So we've got people coming here. When a community like ours grows faster than its infrastructure, you look at anywhere in the country, a community that grows faster than its infrastructure will see more people becoming homeless. It is not the fault of the homeless services or the organizations or the services that they provide are not what's driving the numbers. And I think sometimes people are unaware of that and think that somehow it's that the services are not being done well, rather than that, as one of my colleagues said, we've got a really great game of offense going on. We are getting people into housing right, left, and sideways, and we do a great job at that. And we are losing it on defense because we can't control the housing market and how many people are coming into our system to seek help.
Just in terms of your total budget, is there a certain number or percentage of how much these funds make up, that you guys have been able to figure out over the past 4 years?
HSN's budget, I can't speak for all my partners, Homeless Services Network budget was 77% these funds. So it would have been devastating.
And the rest comes from contributions?
The rest can come from contributions from local jurisdictions, state funding. But yes, absolutely. The backbone of funding for homeless services in our community are the federal funds.
Thank you.
Just a final question for the congressman. Before the federal ruling yesterday, Leader Jeffries had called for an emergency caucus meeting amongst Democrats to address the funding freeze. Did that caucus meeting still happen today? And the second part, I'm sure you're familiar with the criticism from people on the left who say, well, if it's such an emergency, why wasn't it held yesterday? Why was it held a full 24 hours later?
No, thank you. Yeah, we did have the caucus meeting today. It was a really important meeting where we just spoke through different ideas and ways that we could respond, heard from members, and planning on continuing to do events across the country. Because even though the Trump administration rescinded this OMB memo, the threat still remains. We still have to remain vigilant. I tweeted this earlier. We won the battle, but we're still in the war, right, against Project 2025 and a lot of this work that they want to engage in. And so I think that's important. As far as criticisms online with the meeting is concerned, I can tell everybody the caucus was working hard yesterday. Leadership was working hard on figuring out what to do. A lot of things happened, behind the scenes, and I think something that Leader Jeffries recognized really quickly is that the most important thing is to get litigation rolling as soon as possible. And that is actually what he was focused on yesterday. He was spending the whole day on the phone with labor unions and organizations and attorneys general to figure out what suits could be brought forward. And ultimately, yesterday, that's what halted all this in the immediate. And so I think that's important as well.
So you don't think that reflected this larger concern that Democrats have been caught flat-footed in the first couple weeks of the Trump administration?
Well, I talking from my office, we were very busy yesterday. We were very active yesterday. We called an emergency press conference, active on social media, and flooded the zone to make sure people in Central Florida knew about what was going on. And we've received tons and tons of messages from people saying thank you for the work that you've done. And it's not just my work, but the work of my staff and our team and everyone who came together. So we were busy yesterday. We're going to continue to be busy, especially over the next 4 years, because this is not going to be the last thing that happens like this. And so we got a lot of work to do. Last thing I want to say, though, I think is really important is just another point for people to recognize how important these services are. It was a few months ago, I was speaking with some folks who were sleeping under I-4 here in downtown, and I spoke with one gentleman. He's was about my age, actually. And I think a lot of times people assume that everyone you see on the streets, that they've been on the streets for years and years and years, and that's true for a group of people. But for many people, it's very recent. And I spoke to one gentleman who said he had just gotten evicted recently, maybe a month before, and I remember him saying, I'm new to the homeless thing. And I asked him, what had happened. He said he was short on his rent, and all he needed was $500. $500. And it's just another point here that, again, we live in a country where half of our people live paycheck to paycheck. Most people can't afford an unexpected bill tomorrow. Wages have been stagnant. Prices, of course, have gone up in part because of COVID and the horrible response to it from technically the current administration. And so we just have a lot of work to do in making sure there's a lot of anger in the country because there's so much wealth inequality. And the richest keep becoming richer and the poor becoming poor. And we have to address that. And unfortunately, part of the reason why this freeze happened is because there's people in DC who want to free up taxpayer money to give billionaires and corporations tax cuts. And so that's another battle that we're going to be engaged in soon. But either way.
Congressman.
What's next on the state level? So we still have more work to do. It's not over, but what's next? What can the people expect to see in the future?
Well, part of it is staying vigilant, and that's part of what our office is going to do, and seeing what the administration is going to do next. We anticipate that because the executive order is still here, that they're going to begin looking at programs one by one and cutting things. But what folks should understand, I haven't said this yet, is that what they did is illegal. What they did is completely illegal. Congress is not under the presidency. We are equal. We are co-governing the country. And Congress has the power of the purse. We decide how money is spent. The executive then doesn't. The president does not have the legal authority to unilaterally just stop spending money because it's not aligned with his agenda. And so the other thing we're going to see is people are going to continue with litigation because what happened was illegal, even though it's been rescinded, and we can't let that slide without accountability. And so there'll be a lot going on. But yeah.
May I please ask you something on another topic, if it's apropos, if it's okay? The president basically wants to build a 300,000 seat facility to house illegal migrants. And Governor Ron DeSantis is behind it. I'm just curious about your reaction to that.
I could talk to you after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any final questions?
30 minutes, sorry.
Okay, I think the speaker already went off, so I guess we're done. Thank you for being here. We're all
Time
around if
all
you
day.
have additional
Yeah, that's
questions.
That was what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, I said 300,000.
Oh, no, yeah.